the time zone thing, I keep forgetting. And so I put it down as 2 o'clock, and then I thought, wait a second, was that 2 o'clock his time? And then I looked back and it says 3 o'clock. Then I'm like, well, maybe it was 3 o'clock his time. And well, here we are.
Here we are. Am I an hour off?
No. I mean, okay. Is this what we had planned?
Works fine for me.
Yeah, it's like the first time I ever tried to learn transposition, right?
Oh my gosh. When was that? Do you remember? I remember distinctly the first time I encountered transposition.
Okay, you go first. I want to hear what yours was.
I was at Interlaken, and I was so it was in the summer of '83. So I'm 14 years old, and I sat down to play Tchaikovsky's Fifth Symphony. I don't know if you know Jeff Work, trumpet player. Jeff,
I know the name. Uh-huh.
He's principal trumpet in Oregon right now. So I'm sitting next to him, and he's 3 years older than me or so. And I looked over and I said, because we always sight read on Monday morning, and then we'd read the rest of the week and play a concert on Sunday. And I said, what the heck is trumpet in A? And he said, you're going to have to find out really quickly. So it wasn't even playing a B flat part on C trumpet, or it was just like immediately into trumpet in A. I was like, what? So anyway, what was yours?
Well, it was maybe 1984, 85, and it was one of my first lessons in college, where all of a sudden, and I had no idea what was going on, and it took forever. And it's like putting your shoes on the wrong feet. It feels wrong. You stumble all over the place, and eventually you learn how to do it. But it was so trumpet in A was my nemesis for a long time, until I was assigned trumpet in E. Who thinks it could get worse than A, right?
Now, are we talking B flat trumpet or C trumpet?
I didn't have a C trumpet for a long time. So
okay, so that's awful.
Yeah,
that's the worst.
You can't pull your slide out far enough or push it in far enough to accommodate that one, right?
No, you cannot. I'm trying to think if there's a worse one, but anyway, we digress, or I digress. I don't know.
No, this is great. So, well, thanks for the interview. It's been fun.
Yeah, good. Nice chatting with you. I think you got some good material.
I think so. I'll have to fill a little bit, but So, well, let me do a formal welcome. This is the case with these interviews, is I usually forget to actually welcome somebody to the program, even though it's not live. But do you want to go by James or Jim?
Jim, please, yeah.
So, Jim Stephenson, welcome to Studio HFL. I'm glad to have you here.
Thank you very much, Larry. I will try my best. Wait, is it higher, faster, louder, right? HFL?
Yes, that's where it started. And I changed it a couple of months ago to Hear from Legends.
Oh, okay. Well, how about, I don't fit the legends part, so you have to change it again, I'm afraid.
Well, okay, so the other part of the byline is interviewing legends and legends in the making. So you might fit that second category then.
I'll do my best.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm sorry to digress, but glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
So, there's so many great people in the trumpet world, and I'm discovering beyond. I kind of limited myself to trumpet players to begin with. And then I thought, man, Joe Alessi would be a good interview. And then you get outside of the trumpet world, and then you start thinking, man, some of these composer guys are pretty interesting too. I'm sure they would have something.
We'll see.
Well, but the caveat here is you were actually a trumpet player first. So it's the best of both worlds.
I definitely was very much a trumpet player, and still to this day, I'm surprised I'm speaking as only a composer. It kind of surprises me still.
It's funny, in our back and forth this past week setting this up, you reminded me that, well, I didn't know this actually. You said, I don't play trumpet anymore. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So this might be a good place to start. When did that case close and you shoved it under the bed?
Officially, okay, so I moved to Illinois the short of it is that I used to play in an orchestra, and we quit in 2007 when I had become a full-time composer. So at that point, I said to myself, if I'm going to be a composer, it's not going to be very efficient to keep trying to practice trumpet every day, because what's the point? So I went full head of steam into composing. The trumpet did, as you say, pretty much go under the bed. That being said, I did play, in quotes, a couple of Easter gigs in those next couple of years. And so I would get the trumpet out, in February of that Easter year and try to get in shape. And then finally, that went away as well, as it should have. And so there have been a couple of attempts to change my embouchure and figure out how to play the trumpet once and for all since becoming a composer. But that literally, it's like 2 weeks on my face once a year, and then I give up again. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Mm-hmm.
So,
was that difficult to do?
Which part? To quit?
No, yeah, to set that aside. I mean, you obviously loved it to do it as long as you did.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I would say that if I wasn't trying to launch a career from scratch as a composer, then I probably would have missed trumpet. I certainly missed it, but I was so busy, and knock on wood, I'm still very busy. So I've had this nice distraction from missing the trumpet. Sure. So I do wish I could pull out the horn and play things I've written or test things I'm wanting to write, but I just can't. I mean, even like a month ago, my daughter was, she's a singer-songwriter. Actually, two of my daughters are, but in this case, one of my daughters was wanting to incorporate a solo jazz trumpet into one of her songs. And she said, come on, Dad, get your horn out. And I did. I got my horn out, and she pushed the red button, whatever, hit the record button, and I tried playing, and it was so bad. And it's bad when your daughter even looks at you and says, okay, let's look for plan B. So the best result was that Rex Richardson recorded the solo for it instead. I called him up and said, hey, Rex, and he did it. And so she got a great trumpet solo out of it.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Do you know the name Brian Balmages?
Of course. Oh, my gosh, yes. Yeah.
Pardon me.
Brian and I, we're good friends.
Sorry about that. At least
that's all right.
I know the editor. I know who I can speak to edit that part out. Brian comes to Indy to record for FJH, and I've been lucky to be on a number of his sessions.
Yeah.
Great stuff. A lot of fun to play. And barely chatted with him. But he said the same thing, like Easter, Christmas and Easter. He gets the horn out just long enough to get his chops back in shape, just to get through some of those holiday things.
Well, you asked if I know Brian Balmages. First of all, I've heard him play, and so I'm jealous of him, because if he can still do it, I can't. I mean, if I try to play, I literally can't do it. I suffered some injuries, and the chops just aren't there. But Brian and I have a relatively similar path in a way, in that we're both trumpet players and became composers. But the Easter gig that you reference is actually at the church that I used to play in Naples, Florida. So
small world.
He took over after I left town, and they're much happier to have him. But the world is very small in that way. And Brian, well, he'll often send me a picture of where he is on that sunrise gig. Mm-hmm. Say, hey, miss you.
So, well, what's life like for you these days? I mean, sometimes people think about composers being hermits and secluded out in, some cabin in the woods. Although everybody is secluded out in the, being a hermit these days. Right.
Yeah, I mean, in one sense, it is very similar to what our lives are usually like, but there's no travel involved, obviously, now. So even more secluded than ever, which has had a couple pluses. I've been really able to focus on some projects without the distractions of traveling. I don't like to use the word distraction because I love traveling, but it does take away from your time. Sure. But life has been really fun and rewarding as a composer, and when I say the word rewarding, I just mean life. It's fulfilling something I didn't even know needed to be fulfilled. Just this late in life interest to create music from scratch and be in charge of the whole result, and invent things, slowly improvise and invent things and put them on paper and see where they can go. It's just so cool to start something you have no idea where it's going to go, and then pretty soon the piece is telling you what it needs to do, and you make friends with this piece of music you're writing, and you have this relationship for a month or whatever, and then you put it away and move on to the next thing or send it off. But I'm happy to say I'm fairly busy and working on what I love about my job is in quotes again. What I love about my career, my life, whatever, is just the variety of things I get to do. You play many styles. And so as a composer, I just finished a ballet score, and next I'm writing just some simple pieces for, I don't mean simple, but relative to a ballet score, for French horn and piano. And I just finished some band pieces, and I get to write a piano concerto soon. And it's just all these different things that keep me from getting too bored and stuck in a rut. So very similar to playing lots of different gigs.
I got to go back to a comment you made. You said late in life. Now, doing the math and talking about when you were 14, I think you're a few years younger than me, and I can say this is not late in life. Hopefully we've got a long way to go before we get to actually use that statement. But I know what you mean.
I don't actually remember how I put it, but I became a full-time composer at age 38, and that feels a little bit over the hill when you look down at when you look at these, I meant down in age, at the 21-year-olds who are just getting out of school, or 25, they've got their doctorate and they're killing it. They're writing this fresh stuff and it's great, and they're, getting a great following as they should. And you're like, man, I didn't even start till I was 38, really. So,
that reminds me, I had a freshman come into the University of Indianapolis this past year, and trumpet, music education major. And in a couple of lessons, she goes, I've been writing these things. And I'm like, really? Can I hear? She goes, I don't really share it with anybody. So I finally convinced her. I said, email me. I'll listen. Well, it was really good stuff. And then I said, you need to take this to our composition faculty. And the next thing I know, right, she's working harder and more feverishly on the composition aspect than her trumpet lessons. But I'm thinking, she's 18, and she's got all these ideas, but no idea how to get it out, right?
Yeah.
And I think, so I guess what I'm saying is, when did that composition bug, when did you have these ideas start to be like, hey, you got to get me out of the head and onto paper?
Well, first of all, I have to commend you for getting that music from her and checking it out, because sometimes, I know in my case, what we composers need is just that little bit of encouragement from somebody else, because it's so inside your own head, and it's your baby, and you don't know if it's good, and not only are you competing, in quotes again, against all your colleagues, but you've got Beethoven and Mozart and all these dead composers that everybody's still playing, and you're like, who am I to think that I can do anything like that? So bravo to you to giving her the encouragement, because you might have unleashed a monster, and now she
did. It was like fanning the flames, it was just
awesome. Yeah.
And yeah.
In my case, I started completely by accident, because I had joined the Naples Philharmonic, that aforementioned orchestra that I talked about, when I was 21, and thought I was on my way to being a trumpet player forever, and wanted to be a trumpet player forever. But our brass quintet was doing educational concerts, and we just needed something to play for these kids. We were sick of playing Bang a Sang-A-Leader and William Tell and all the other standards that we all know in the brass quintet world. And somebody said we should do something these kids really love. Why don't we do a Disney tune? And for some reason I said I'll do it, and I arranged. So this is Opus 1 for me. I arranged, Under the Sea, the popular Disney, from Little Mermaid.
Yeah.
And I sat down at my desk and I just was like, wow, this is fun. This is really cool. Hey, why don't I give the solo line to the tuba? Let them do something. Then whatever. It was just fun to mess around with with the musical algorithms, if you will, and played it, and the quintet seemed to like it, so that was fun. And then we played it for the kids, and they loved it, right? So, it had the added benefit of some really good tunes, so it was hard to miss. But so that started my arranging career. And what was really funny, the Naples Philharmonic was a brand new orchestra, and they hired one of the best pops conductors who you know very well, Eric Kunzel, because you played under him, right?
I did with him.
I don't know if you know him, but you played under him.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, so he became our pops conductor in Naples. This brand spanking new orchestra hires one of the best known pops conductors in the world. And suddenly we're playing all these killer arrangements, and he's looking for an arranger because it's like his probably fifth orchestra that he's in charge of, and he needs new charts all the time. And so he had heard that Jim Stephenson was an arranger because I had done like 2 brass quintet charts. And so he called me in and said, hey, I have a Christmas concert coming up. Why don't you arrange this? And so I had to learn how to write for orchestra at that very moment, like get busy. And that was my study from that point on, just sitting in the orchestra and writing for my friends. And so that's how I got started.
Yeah. So, I'm thinking, okay, orchestra is one thing, but when you start to write for harp or orchestral piano or keyboards or mallets, it's like, where's my orchestration book?
Yeah.
So was it kind of that same thing? You gotta start doing some really quick research into.
This was pre-internet, I think. Yeah, it was totally. Well, I mean, the internet was around, but we didn't use it the way we do it now. So I bought I think it's Alfred Blatter orchestration book. Bought the Blatter orchestration book. So that was great. You just turn to page 50 that has the harp on. I'm making that up, but yeah, you could just look and see what you needed. But for me, I could just walk over to my harp player and say, is this possible? And I tell this story a lot, so I don't, if anybody happens to listen to another podcast, I literally went over to the harp player and said, what are those things at the bottom? I did not know that harps had pedals on them to change the pitches. I just thought that, it's like a piano, you do this. And so that was a big learning curve, but, then it becomes like a mathematical equation. Hey, how can I work the enharmonics on a harp? And it becomes kind of fun. And like I said, I could just go ask him if something was stupid, and he would tell me. So that was a nice bonus that I had living in the orchestra.
So then comes the question, have you ever written anything where somebody's called you up and said, what the heck were you thinking? Now, I say that, and then I'm thinking it's Rex when you wrote Rex. Right? It's like, holy cow.
Well, Rex came to, a lot of my trumpet music has some virtuosic requirements and technical and endurance requirements, which is interesting because those were not I was good at technical playing, but endurance was not my forte. High notes were not my thing. But, I end up writing for people who can do it. So I've written certainly some music that is harder than what I could have played. So yes, I get called out for sure. It's all your fault. You guys are the ones who you play it. So then we're like, oh, that's possible.
Yeah. Okay. But this happened when I was working on my master's. You're in the practice room and you're going through your routine, doing all these things that you never ever do in performance.
Yeah.
Right. And then I have this composition student approach me. He goes, hey, Larry, I wrote this piece. Will you play on it? And so he shows it to me, and it has a lot of the elements of my routine. These 2-octave glisses and lip slurs that you only do.
Yeah.
And and I stupidly said, Sure, I'll play. Oh, it was horrible. It was just horrible.
Well, it was just your warm up, so how hard could it have been?
Well,
No,
apparently it was pretty hard, and too hard for me to play, in front of anybody.
I think, because I was a performer for so long, I mean, I started sitting in an orchestra when I was 10, and like I said, didn't quit till I was 38. So I'm very aware of what brings a performer joy and what makes something worth it. And so I'm not going to say I always succeed, but it's pretty much the forefront of my brain to try to make the people who are actually doing the work, sitting in the chair, the hot lights on them, and the audience out there, and the conductor, and all that sort of stuff. I want to make them hopefully feel like it's worth it, and not only worth it, but like enjoyable, a challenge where they feel like they're a better player because of what they played.
I can speak directly to that because I think the first time I had played any of your music was Compose Yourself.
Yeah.
What year did that come out?
Well, I wrote it in 2002. I'm trying to remember. Did we do it in Anderson or in?
I've done it in Anderson and down in Owensboro.
That's
Kentucky.
Right. Yep.
And everybody's done all the kiddie concerts, and you try to program. You can only do. Well, anyways, you get this piece, and I'm looking through it, and I'm thinking, oh, this looks fun. Was it 13, 14 instruments? I mean, it's a fairly small orchestra.
I have two versions, but the original was 15 player. Yeah.
And I thought, okay, not just fun for the player, but really well conceived for the audience. And so bravo on that. I mean, hopefully that's been a huge success for you. But if it gets programmed and I see it coming, in the mail, I'm like, hooray! Fun on this one.
Well, that's good to hear. I mean, again, that just comes from sitting in the orchestra and doing a lot of those educational concerts, and somebody coming to me and saying, "Hey, here's the deal. We're going to be going to a lot of schools, so we're going to take 15 people out. It's basically every instrument of the orchestra. And wouldn't it be fun to do this and feature every instrument, but make it fun for the kids and interactive and all that sort of thing?" So it was somebody else's idea. They said, "Jim, do this and run with it." So I spent the summer of 2002 doing it. And I think the Naples Philharmonic, who I originally wrote it for, they've played it 300 times.
Oh my gosh.
So, but the coolest thing about that is I've had players who have done it all 300 times actually tell me that they still enjoy it, which to me is like that. That's a big compliment. I'm grateful when they say that. Maybe they're lying, but it's nice of them to say it anyway.
So, is there going to be a follow-up to Decompose Yourself?
Conduct Yourself. I don't know. So yeah.
So, I've got a 13-year-old boy here who's studying piano, just started a year and a half ago, is in love with Liszt and Beethoven, and listens to all these composers. And I'm listening to him practice slowly, and I'm thinking, you listen to Moonlight Sonata, not the first movement, right, but the third movement, which is just furious.
Right.
And I think, could Beethoven actually play that himself? He's writing this. And the answer is probably yes.
I think so, yeah.
So then begs the question, can you play everything that you write?
Well, I could until I stopped playing. So I want to back that up a little bit. Like my first trumpet concerto is pretty difficult. It's got some licks in it, all of which I did play through. So I knew they were possible. I think I might have even done it in one sitting once, but I never did it, in front of an orchestra, in front of an audience, for the conductor keeping time, all the things that go into that. So that was 2003. I wrote the concerto for Rex, which you mentioned, in 2010, I think. And I played through some of the licks, but that was right when I was quitting. And I certainly couldn't play any of the high stuff. And I couldn't do the improv stuff, but I could play a lot of it, just not all at once. And then I quit. So anything after that, I haven't even had a chance to try. But I did perform my first sonata once, so I know that was possible for me. But it's also not being able to play has given me a certain freedom in composing, I have to say too, because I would often write with my own limitations in mind. So finally, when I freed myself up from playing and not worrying about whether I could slur up to a high D, which I can't, I never could, because I just didn't have that range. And, stuff like that, whatever. Once I found out that I could just write for other people and let them do what they do, that freed me up a lot. And actually, I think made my music hopefully more interesting because it's just not written with me in mind.
So Rex asked me to ask you about your piano skills. And I'll edit this out if you don't want to answer. But he started laughing, when I was talking to him about this. But,
is he referring to the one time we played together?
Well, I think what came up was, we were talking about conductors. Our composers good conductors. And then it went to our composers also good at the piano, and that's when your name came up.
I'm laughing. No, it's I'm not a good piano player. I took 5 years from like age 8 to 13, and so I know how my hands are supposed to be on a piano, and I know that there are limitations there too. And I'll play things in really slow motion, but I'll tell you, we did one gig together. I wrote a piece called Reflections, and it's for, I've done all sorts of versions now, but it was for trumpet and piano at one point. And he played it at a conference, played it on flugelhorn, and I said, well, I'll accompany you on piano. And I hadn't written a piano part. It was just me making stuff up at that point. I've since written an actual piano part. I don't think I've been more nervous in my life. And so there's a recording on my website of us doing it, or it's somewhere. It's on YouTube. And I mean, my tone is terrible. At one point I hit a completely wrong chord and I just kind of go on like nothing happened. But I mean, yeah, it's pretty bad. Pedaling is awful. But my trick is to just kind of feel out on piano if something might be possible, and then I move away to the computer and sort of take it from there.
Well, and in all fairness, I will admit right here and now that I am horrible at piano. I only did well enough to pass my proficiencies.
Yeah.
Probably like a lot of people, right?
Right. Well, you had other things on your mind, right?
Yeah, exactly. So you've got all this music in your head. You're trying to get it out. Not trying. You are getting it out. You're putting it out there. Do you find yourself writing in styles that you grew up with, or does it all just feel completely organic, completely original?
Little of both, but I'm somewhat of a classical composer, not classical period composer, but I am a fan of form and melodic writing and stretching tonalities, but not forgetting about tonalities. Those are important to me still. But I think one thing about my style is that most of my music sounds different from each other. All 5 of my trumpet concertos, for example, in my mind, do not resemble each other, other than that they make the trumpet player work quite a bit. But the styles of all 5 of them are very unique. And that's because I'm always looking for the story of the individual I'm writing about or writing for, or the story I'm writing about. Like I wrote I think it's worthy for sure to mention Ryan Anthony, given his passing a couple of weeks ago. I wrote a concerto for him, and he wanted a concerto about his struggle and life with cancer. So that piece took on an entirely different sound world than anything else I'd ever written. Rex came to my house and demonstrated some things for me, and some intervallic patterns that he really likes to use, and so I wrote that concerto with those in mind. And first concerto I wrote for Jeff Work, and he loves, he's principal trumpet in Oregon Symphony, and we're old friends. And he would always send me recordings of cornet soloists from like 1905 and 1908, names like Bohemmer Krill, and these old time people who had crazy technique, just crazy technique. Their sounds are like as big as a pea, like they're, could have been the recordings. But anyway, so he loves that sort of stuff. So I wanted to make sure I incorporated like a modern cornet style into his concerto. And so everything I write, I just go into this new world based on what the subject matter is. And then it reveals itself in a new sound. So so that's my style, is just seeking a new sound world. Which is a lot of fun for me.
Do you try to mix things up occasionally? And I don't mean like giving the melody to the tuba, like you mentioned earlier, but it's like, oh, I've really wanted to use this orchestration, this combination. This is the perfect piece for this. Or maybe I'm...
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if I would put it that way. It's more like, hey, I haven't tried doing this yet. Let's try that here. I'm very conscious of trying not to become a habitual composer or there goes Jim again, blending this and this and this. I've heard that before. So I'm always looking for new ways to mix things up, like you said. But, and I will say in my career, there are times where I purposefully try to find a new sound that maybe doesn't have to do with the subject matter I'm writing about. Usually I'm unhappy with that. Like, I'll do an experiment and that teaches me, okay, I don't like that style. So it's like, I have to go through the process of writing a piece in a certain style to finally realize that that's not me. That's not my story. Yeah.
I have heard some of your bigger symphonic works or symphonic band. I know, like the Indianapolis, Charlie Conrad's group.
Oh, the
Indiana Wind Symphony.
Yeah.
And you had actually come down, I think, to rehearse.
I conducted it, yeah. My second symphony.
Conducted. Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
And I can't say that it reminds me of a certain styles, other than it's your style,
That one, again, because of what it was about, that piece I wrote after my mother passed away. And it was a very difficult but sort of life-affirming process for me to process losing my mother and then to put that into music. And the whole piece is literally a 20-minute journey about that experience. And I even incorporated a mezzo-soprano voice, which is that of my mother, kind of singing and saying, everything's going to be okay. And just, again, by using these elements that I otherwise wouldn't have done, it just shaped the sound of that piece, and has probably become the most meaningful piece I've written so far. But yeah, I got to come down to Indy and conduct it, and I've conducted it several places in addition to that, and it's always a great way to just kind of connect with audiences and musicians, which is my favorite part, because that's my life. That's my former life.
I've run into you at least once at an ITG. I mean, I know you like to get out there and of course you want to do the good PR thing, right? And make sure your name gets out there. But I want to go back to that piece you were just talking about and how you wrote it. Was it in memoriam? How would you talk about the way you wrote that?
Well, to be completely honest, I couldn't write it for about a month. It was for the Marine Band, and I had a deadline. And my mom died in April of 2016, and I thought that it would be easy to write music based on my mother dying, and the complete opposite was the case for about a month. I couldn't figure anything out. And so I finally went to the piano and, for whatever reason, slammed down a hard low E flat chord with my left hand, an octave, not a chord, but an octave, and then just kind of this crunchy, screaming oh, woe is me sort of chord on top of that. And then I said to myself, okay, I can work with that. Not only that, I'm going to take that E flat and I'm going to force myself not to get back to E flat again until I've figured this out. So the entire piece is a journey of that opening E flat to an arrival at E flat major like 20 minutes later. And in doing so, if you make rules like that, it forces you to dig deep. It forces you to look for other ways to handle problems and technical issues that come up, and sound issue, theoretical issues that come up. So, and I have to say, when I finally got to that E flat chord 20 minutes later, I was a mess. I mean, it was like I was crying at the piano, and it was just like, oh, Mom, I did it. That sort of. I don't want to sound too cliche, but I had one of those moments.
Yeah. So was that E flat arbitrary, or was there significance too?
It was relatively arbitrary, but I wouldn't be surprised if there was a little bit of let's find a good key for band while I hit this low note. I didn't hit a B, for example.
Thank you.
And so I probably thought to myself, all right, this, maybe I haven't written a lot of music in E flat major at that point in my career. There were probably a few thoughts that went into it, but I hit the chord, and then I was kind of off to the races. Mm-hmm. But it was fun is the wrong word, but it was a very intense.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. I can't imagine what that's like to be able to pour yourself into that kind of piece. I mean, I can get a sense, of hearing and watching you talk about this,
mm-hmm.
the meaning for it, the meaning of it.
Yeah, it takes a lot out of you. I don't want to have to write music like that a lot, because, you do it and you're just like, man, it's so rewarding, but to dig that deep also is just exhausting. And so it was big feeling of phew afterward. But,
and see, this is, now I'm thinking I would want to play that piece now, knowing how it was inspired, how it came about, because that would change, hopefully, at least the way I play it, and hopefully everybody else around me. I think context. It's not like you're just sitting down. Okay, here's a march. We're just going to do this.
Right. Yeah.
And
well,
all the repeats. This is, and knowing that journey. And I think I wish there were more opportunity to know that really about a lot of pieces in music, the real classics.
Right.
More than just the surface information about the Emperor Concerto. Right, is what did Beethoven really have in mind? What kind of angst and that sort of thing.
Yeah, well, now that I do this for a living, it is my assumption that every composer works this way, and so I know exactly what you're saying. Mm-hmm. Because I know that I put that sort of hidden code, if you will, into every piece I write, and so I imagine all of us composers do. And we are just hoping that people will meet us halfway and seek it out and discover it, and then we can have these conversations with people. But if they don't, hopefully they just like it at the surface value as well. But I can tell you that it's there for those who want to find it, and I'm pretty sure all composers work that way. And like you said, I would love to go back and chat with those folks and say, hey, tell me about this one. Right.
Well, first of all, I would have to make sure I'm fluent in whatever language, because otherwise it's going to be a really awkward time.
This is true. Say play.
Okay, so the first time you hear your voice on a recording, it's awkward, right? Or the first time you see yourself on video.
Oh yeah.
Right. So what about the first time you hear one of your pieces performed?
Yeah. Well, here's the worst part. Not the worst part, because you're so grateful to be there, but the first rehearsal is so... I don't even like to go to first rehearsals, because we know, by we I mean the composers, we know what we're hoping it's going to sound like. And sometimes it's easy to forget that the musicians are just playing it for the first time. They're going to play wrong notes. They're going to play, they're going to sight read things a little bit. And so it doesn't sound good. And you're just wanting to stand up and scream and say, no, please, it's better than this, I promise. And so usually by the second rehearsal, it sounds, you know how musicians are. You guys figure things out so perfect. So by the second rehearsal, everything's fine. And then they start to dig in and realize the shape of it. Yeah, but the other answer to your question is that we composers, our classroom is sort of every performance, right? And we don't get a performance every day of a new piece. So sometimes it's, especially now, let's not even talk about right now, but sometimes it's a month or 2 months or maybe 6 months between premieres of a piece. And that's when you learn the most. That's when you say, oh boy, that didn't work the way I wanted to. So then you have to, composers have a choice whether to then revise that piece or to just put that knowledge into the next piece. And I'm usually the one who's putting that knowledge into the next piece just because I have to keep moving forward. But it's, I wish there was that's why I wish I had studied composition in school. I want to delete this part so that people won't write me off as a fool. But I was a trumpet player in school, so I didn't study composition. So I wish I had those opportunities to really learn quicker, to have a teacher tell me maybe twice a week that something I'm doing is stupid. But hopefully most of the time it's spot on and it's the way we want it. But there are those times where it's like, darn it, that's that one.
Yeah. It just reminded me, recording sessions, we'll go in and oftentimes the composer is either in the booth or on the podium.
Yep.
And we'll rehearse and then somebody will stop and say, hey, I've got a B flat on beat 4. Did you mean for that to happen? And I've gotten so tired of that. I'm thinking, you know what? If they wrote it, play it. If they don't like the way it sounds, they'll say something about it, and it just drives me nuts when we get into a session and this happens. I don't know if you've encountered this. And sometimes, they do find a mistake. Oh yeah, that, when I extracted it from Sibelius or Finale, whatever happened.
Yeah.
It just drives me nuts to hear. I'm thinking the composer, he chose that note or she chose that note. Leave it alone.
Yeah. I mean, there's two answers. I mean, it is a fair question sometimes because these computer programs, as advanced as they are, they still, no matter how good you are at the program, they still will throw you a curveball and an accidental will get left off. I don't want to go into the techniques of how that happens, but it just does.
Yeah.
And so sometimes that's a very fair question. But I have had that certainly happen where it is definitely, I like to put major sevenths in the bass note sometimes, which in my world keeps the music propelled forward and gives it a fresh, nice sound. And so I can't tell you how many times I've had those who are playing the bass line saying, "Do you really mean that A natural in that B flat major chord? Did you mean that?" And yes. Can't you hear how cool it is? So that's, but then there are times where there are people who say it just because they want you to know that they've noticed something and they want to speak up about it. That happens. But
I was, what was it, 92, 93, and I can't remember the name of, this was when I first encountered computer programming for music. Might have been Make Music or a precursor to Finale or something like that.
Well, they own Finale. They're
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. But early 90s, and it was a chore to put, and of course the computer speeds were nowhere near where they are now. And so even trying to render anything, final product just took forever. But now, these days, it's so easy. And Jim Beckel here in town, fantastic writer himself. I'm talking to him, and he actually assigns all the orchestra sounds. So his MIDI product that goes out sounds like a live symphony orchestra.
Yeah, I should talk to him.
But to me, that's amazing that you can do that. I don't have that kind of patience. If I'm doing an arrangement, it's going to sound like MIDI. You know?
Yeah, I mean, and not only that, we can manipulate things to even make it sound better than it should. I mean, because on a computer, yeah, I do that as well. I assign all the orchestral sounds, but like for whatever reason, Finale believes that harp should be really loud, so you can hear the harps. An entire orchestra can be playing, and you can hear the harp clear as a, oh, that sounds really cool. So if you haven't ever been in an orchestra or done much orchestrating, you could easily make a mistake in that regard. And so there are balance things that we can adjust to make it sound better than it should. Yeah, but it's very helpful. It's an extremely helpful tool to playback.
So what are you working on these days? What is there more than one project going on, or do you just focus on one at a time?
I do just focus on one at a time, but I have probably somewhere between 15 and 20 that are kind of on the schedule. So I'm happy to say I'll be busy for a while. But like I said earlier, it's a hodgepodge of things, which is what makes it really fun. You're finishing one, you're like, oh, I get to do this other thing next. And, piano concertos in the future, and I think I mentioned I just finished a ballet score. I'm writing a concerto for euphonium, horn, and wind ensemble, and solo trumpet work, solo trombone work, several band pieces.
Let's go back to the ballet for a second.
Yes.
How does that work? Do you get the libretto? Well, wait, no, that's opera. So I'm going to edit that out, or I'll sound like an idiot.
That works for me. The storyboard. I mean,
storyboard. Thank you. Okay, so there is something.
Yeah,
that you can
absolutely. Okay. Yeah. I now know how it happened, but for a long time I had no idea how they came across my name. So this is the San Francisco Ballet.
Let's hope it wasn't through the phone book and they had to work their way through.
It might have. Well, I was very curious. I didn't know for almost a year how they even found me. But I got a call completely out of the blue, and they said, hey, our choreographer has discovered your music and she really likes it, and I'd like to have you write a piece for the ballet. And so then, discussions ensue, and once you figure all that out, she sent me, actually, I have it right here. Not that anybody will be able to see it, but you can see it. So this is the storyboard, little stick figures.
Yeah.
And what's cool about this, there's 19 scenes, so that is organized for me. And then at the bottom right here, not that anybody can see it, she said how long each scene should be. So it's like, hey, I need a minute of this, I need 4 minutes of this. And but that's all, that's what I got. And then she said, all right, go to town and write the music. But again, as I said earlier, because it's this story, right? I get to go into a world that I otherwise wouldn't have been in and actually tell a story, which I'm finding is something I absolutely love to do. And so it's a 40-minute ballet, and it's the story of a woman in the 20s named Fanny Brice. I don't know if you ever saw the movie Funny Girl.
Yeah.
It's the same story, not the same story, but the same character. A comedian, actress in the 20s who rises to fame. And, so all the music kind of has this vaudeville character to it, and early jazz, and I get to write for full orchestra, which is nice. So it's I just finished it about a week ago, and
so I think about Tchaikovsky and Nutcracker, and you have character dances. Anything like that in this?
Absolutely, yeah, because there are two main characters, and they have their pas de deux at one point, and then there's one scene where he gets his solo, and there's one scene or a couple where she gets her solo, and you're writing music, and you're sort of also imagining they can't be spinning all the time. They have to have rest. They can't jump 20,000 times. So you're right. At least I was writing music trying to imagine if I was up on stage, how I'd want the flow to be, and also imagining if I was in the orchestra, what I'd want to play. Because I've played a ton of ballets. I played in the pit all the time. So all that's in there, but I love focusing on the characters and giving them a persona, bouncing them off each other and all that sort of thing.
Of course, you know Appalachian Spring.
Yep.
Ballet for Martha. I did a master's project on this, and there are character dances, and most people don't think about that as, I mean, there are specific sequences throughout that ballet, and I likened it, I mentioned Nutcracker, I likened it to Nutcracker for my project, and the professor said, I never thought about the Copeland this way before. I mean, it was an automatic A, which made me really happy.
Awesome.
You know, that piece, when you know the character dances and you watch the ballet, the music takes on a whole new meaning. I mean, it's a great piece just to close your eyes and listen to. But, you know, then when you understand the visual, well, I know I'm saying what doesn't need to be said. I mean, it's a whole new ball game, right?
Yeah. Imagine how many of those things there are out there that are waiting to be discovered like that as well. Yeah. But I've also written a concerto based on Martha Graham. One of my trumpet concertos is telling the story of Martha Graham.
No kidding. What's the title of that one?
It's called Martha Uncaged. Not the best title. Uncaged. I don't even know if that's a word. But when she was 4, or no, she wasn't 4. When she was young, she went to a zoo in New York and saw a lion pacing back and forth in its cage and then doing its turn. And then that gave her the idea of how she would posture herself as a dancer later. She would always, shoulders back and very proud, barefoot. And so that my concerto starts with that sort of walking across stage and a turn. Then the fury of Martha kind of gets, not the fury, but she releases herself into the world and becomes a huge success and innovation. So that's Martha Uncaged. But completely, I read her biography and based on her love affairs and things like that.
Yeah. So this makes me wonder too. She's got this experience with this lion. And she probably tucks that away for a while. What about you and your ideas? I mean, do you have a notebook or some sort of recording device? How do you, let's say you're walking through Home Depot one day, and all of a sudden, the next great lick comes through. How do you?
You've nailed it. That's kind of what happens to us composers. We'll be doing something completely amusical, and then we'll hear it. Oh my gosh, how am I going to remember that? So luckily we all have these devices, our little phones. Yeah. Mine is filled with me singing ideas into it, or I do have a sketchbook somewhere around here. I have discovered that I don't remember them if I don't get them down somehow. Yeah. I can't tell you how many times I'm going to sleep at night and I'm, there it is, perfect piece. I'll remember it in the morning. It's gone. So I do try to get them down one way or another as soon as I can, for sure.
Is there a snippet of a tune out there that you've had forever and you can't develop it beyond what it is?
Interesting question. No, I don't think so. Because usually for me, whatever that snippet is goes into whatever piece I'm writing. Mm-hmm. And then maybe I'll steal from that later if I think it belongs in a different piece. Mm-hmm. I don't think I'm the only composer to do that. But if there's a lick I really like and whatever piece I wrote it in before maybe isn't getting as much play as I'd like, just for whatever reason, like, I like that tune. I'm going to steal that one back.
So that makes me, you mentioned early on in the interview, Stravinsky said composers should steal?
Great composers, good composers borrow, great composers steal.
So have you stolen anything from John Williams?
Not, only when I do so intentionally. Like I once was asked to write I actually just put it on Facebook 2 days. What day is today? Anyway, I put it out there on the 4th. I put it on the 4th because I was once asked to write a piece combining the sounds of John Philip Sousa and John Williams for an American concert. Mm-hmm. And so actually there's another example too, but so I very consciously knew that I was writing a John Williams style because I had been given freedom to do so. And it was interesting for me to try it. Why not? Let's see if I can do it. So that one's called Stars and Stripes Fanfare. But the other one, my first etude book that I wrote in 2010, I don't know if we've ever talked about this project or
no, I don't know about this.
Mine are called Daytudes. I've written 3 of these books. And we talked about Easter earlier when I was trying to get in shape for Easter. I was so bored speaking as a trumpet player. You can even see me, I'm wiggling with my fingers. I was so bored doing the standard warm-ups. Now I'm a composer, right? This is 2010, I'm a composer. And so I was like, I don't want to play Stamp. I don't want to play Schlossberg. I'm going to just make up an etude every day. And so I decided, I'm getting back to the Williams, by the way, but I decided that I would make up an etude, but also I would invite other trumpet players to receive these etudes every single day when I finished them, if they wanted to subscribe. So I think at that time, like 30 or 40 trumpet players signed on, and they would get an email every day in their, at 9 in the morning. I would have written my Daytude, and I would send it off to them, and they'd have their own private world premiere. And the Daytude, would be about whatever was going on in my life or whatever was going on in the world. So in February of 2010, the Winter Olympics were happening. And I was like, I'm going to see if I can write an etude in the style of John Williams, because the Olympics and all that sort of thing. So I wrote one which was very much like him. It has since gone on to become, maybe I should do more of this, one of my more sought after pieces within that tiny market of Jim Stephenson, because I later turned it into a trumpet ensemble piece, which was dedicated to Jeannie Pocius. It's a long story, but she had returned from Haiti. Is that what the earthquake was? Forgive me, Jeannie, for not remembering. I think it was Haiti. She had returned from an earthquake. She'd been caught in an earthquake, broke her leg. She was down there helping trumpet players and musicians, a great teacher. And when she returned to Boston, a trumpet ensemble was there waiting in the terminal and played this fanfare that I had written for her, and I called it Fanfare for an Angel.
I played that piece.
See? And it was based on that etude that I had written in 2010. So Fanfare, thank you. Fanfare for an Angel is very much in the John Williams style on purpose, and has been played by quite a few trumpet players because it lays well on the horn, because I used to play the instrument. So,
I remember one of my former students got married, and called me and said, "Hey, will you play at my wedding?" And I said, "Sure." And he said, "Well, there's this piece by Jim Stephenson," and he sent me the YouTube link, and I ordered the music. And this was for trumpet and organ, the one that I did.
Oh, you did that one? Okay, all right.
And after that, I thought, okay, I want my trumpet ensemble to play this. So then I bought the trumpet ensemble arrangement, and we played that a couple of times. And you can't put freshmen on on the first part on that.
No, you can't.
It's a lot of fun to play. So we'll see again the story behind that, the difference it makes. It's not just, hey, here's another piece.
Yeah.
Again, in context, that changes everything.
It was so cool because the trumpet players in Boston, they actually got permission. This is post 9/11, so they got permission to go into the terminal, so that when Jeannie came walking down the jetway and into the terminal, they were there waiting, and they greeted her with the little fanfare. And
what was her reaction?
I wasn't there, but I'm told that it was, she was in tears or shocked, or just it was a good reaction.
Yeah.
And then Ryan, I think you've probably seen, maybe that's the video you're referencing. Ryan Anthony put a really nice video as part of his Cancer Blows project. He had Chris Martin and Dave Bilger and Mike Sack and Ryan Anthony playing the fanfare. So it's gotten a few hits because he had some pretty heavy hitters.
It's funny. It's almost, Well, it's 11 months since I interviewed Ryan.
Wow.
And I looked on SoundCloud this morning. I'm definitely editing this out. His interview went from like 140 downloads. It's jumped over 100 more in the last little bit. And I tell you, it still stings. And his absence on Facebook, that presence, there was that reassurance, every day or every other day he would post something, with that damned chemo needle stuck in him, it's devastating.
Yeah, but doesn't it give you like inspiration to carry on? I mean,
absolutely, yeah.
It's like, if he could do that, how can I complain about this?
For 8 years.
Yeah. You can still edit this out if you want, but I played I was doing a talk with Interlochen young composers, and I played them the concerto that I had written for Ryan, because he had just passed away, and I wanted to share with them like how I approach composing from a storytelling point of view. And so that was a pretty obvious story, very easy to follow, let me put it that way. And I was bawling. And I'm talking to 33, high school kids, and I'm supposed to be this adult, and I'm just like, I'm wiping my face. I'm watching Ryan masterfully handing this major workout while his body is going through, I don't know if you ever shook hands with him while he was going through the treatment or hugged him, but his body was shaking with all the drugs that were in there, and how he could play trumpet in the midst of all that and inspire the rest of us. It's just amazing to me. So, to Ryan.
What a figure. And I told him, I said, you've galvanized the trumpet community. As if we didn't have enough to talk about amongst ourselves, but you brought us closer together. It's just, what a life, and what a legacy too. That's just, I'm gonna have to move on. It's still hard to think about. And I wasn't even, I wasn't close to him the way Jens and many others were. And it's like, oh my gosh, if I could be moved that much, they've got to be so distraught at this point.
Yeah, it's not fair. It's not fair.
No, it's not. Wayne Bergeron now is out of chemo. He's gone through some stuff, and it's like, wow, it's not going to end. And I really hope that Cancer Blows is around.
Right.
I really want to make sure that keeps going forward. It's so worthwhile.
I agree. I think Nikki deserves, Ryan's wife deserves some time to not have to think about it for a while, but hopefully she'll reach out to someone if she doesn't do it herself and keep it going. Yeah.
So, well, it's like, how do you turn back from that?
Well, I'll tell you, Ryan would want us to. Ryan would say, carry on. So.
Yeah. And we talked about it in that interview, because how can you not? It couldn't just be about Canadian brass and Dallas and all that. It had to be about that, and he was more than willing to talk and to share, and the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yeah.
Of it. So, speaking of the good, the bad, and the ugly, did you see Ennio Morricone passed away?
I was just going to say that was a rather timely phrase you just uttered. Yeah, I did.
Here's another iconic composer. I mean, wow. I mean, just how many different tunes can you think of and a tribute to him? And you know what? This is going to happen to you, Jim.
What, I'm going to die?
No, well, that's not what I meant. This is, like Beethoven's infamous ba 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 ba, and I'm singing it in the wrong key, I'm sure. But you're gonna have all these famous licks, attributed to you.
If I were to be so lucky, it would be time well spent. But it literally is just like you when you're playing. I mean, it's living in the moment. And if anything happens to carry on beyond that moment, that's wonderful. But the metaphor, the journey is what it's all about. If I start writing music thinking, boy, I want to make sure I leave a legacy, then I'm going to fail. I'm going to make sure this one sticks, then the piece is going to be awful. So it's all about just finding that inner something to dig into and just keep.
Well, it just popped into my head. Another happy accident. What if every composition was like Bob Ross painting? Oh, I'm going to put a tree here, and then all of a sudden it transforms everything. So, well, this has been a lot of fun. We've crossed paths, for a minute or two at an ITG conference or place, but it's nice to be able to sit and actually chat with you for a little while.
Absolutely. I'm thrilled you were willing to take a risk and have a quasi non-trumpet player in your interview, and it's great to chat, and I feel like trumpet is still my home base, even though I'm not doing it. So much of my career has been because of playing instrument or who I knew while playing the instrument. So I don't want to forget that for sure. So It's really fun to revisit a lot of stories and people and things like that.
Well, we'll have to revisit in a couple of years or so and see what you've written in the meantime. And of course, you'll be making millions of dollars a composition at that point.
Well, I tell you what, you do that Devil's Tale. I don't live too far away. When the world gets back to normal, maybe you can do my Stravinsky sequel, and then I can come yell at you for playing a B flat when it should have been a B natural or something. Perfect.
So, all right. Well, thank you very much for the time. I appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you, Larry. It's been a real joy.